Russia's Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov just dropped an interview that gets straight to the point. No Western spin, obviously, it's Russia, and very in character for Russia, you could say, to be blunt and get straight to it. In a recent interview, Lavrov said he identified the unresolved Palestinian statehood question as the main factor fueling extremism across the Middle East. And here's why this matters more than you think. It's not just words. For nearly 80 years, Palestinians have been a stateless people. Yes, there has never been a nation state called Palestine, but in the years before Israel's existence and even before British control of the region through mandate, Palestinians, one could argue, didn't need a state. There was no Palestine, there was no Jordan, there was no Saudi Arabia if you go back 100 years, right? They all lived relatively comfortably. They did not have to live under apartheid. They did not have to live under occupation by a distant colonizing culture. They didn't have to have their home and their land stolen out from underneath their feet. Foreign Minister of Russia, Lavrov, pointed out something stark here. He said Israel was created following the United Nations resolutions back in 1948, I believe. But Palestine was not created, despite having the same backing from international law. I'm aware that the Arabs rejected it. They said, why would I recognize half of my house as his and the other half I get to keep? La, kalla, no way. Absolutely not. But try it again now, see how it goes, right? Right now, though, you can't try it. Israeli officials, right all the way up to the prime minister of the Israeli state, say it on the regular now. He says, we will not allow a Palestinian state to exist, to emerge. Imagine growing up as a Palestinian child, knowing the United Nations says you should have your own state. Of course, it's your land. But watching that promise remain unfulfilled generation after generation, and actually not just remain unfulfilled, it gets more and more distant, one could argue. The land that should become your state is eroded day after day. Further stolen land brought under the control of the Israeli state. That's the reality Lavrov is highlighting. Now, I should point out, Russia condemned the October 7th attacks back in 2023, but he also called Israel's response, which has killed anywhere between 67,000 and 500,000 Palestinians, according to local health authorities. He's called it a gross violation of international humanitarian law because it's collective punishment. You're hitting civilians for something a military component did. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Lavrov welcomed Trump's new peace plan for Gaza. Russia welcoming an American plan, right? He admits that the language around a Palestinian statehood in the agreement is basically non-existent. It's too vague to be practical. So why the Russian support? Well, because Lavrov is practical. He says it's the best solution currently on the table. He's being pragmatic. He's being realistic. Russia recognized Palestine back in 1988, ages ago, right? I wasn't even born. Most of you definitely weren't born. And they're not backing down from that position, the Russians. In terms of notable nations that support a Palestinian state, Russia has been an open supporter for years. And according to the Eastern Bear, the Palestinians need their own state. It's not about donating it to them. It's theirs, it's their right, and the absence of it is causing the extremism and instability in the Middle East. This is the Russian narrative. This isn't just about one conflict or one region. Lavrov's argument is that without addressing core injustice of statelessness, extremism will continue to find fertile ground. And it's a solid case that's being made. When you inflict hardship and suffering and injustice with no recourse, with no way to pursue justice, hopeless individuals, bitter individuals seeking retribution, seeking justice, seeking revenge will often resort to armed conflict, armed resistance. For better or worse, that's just what happens. I'm not saying supporting it or opposing it. I'm just saying that's what happens. Now, Lavrov can't exactly say whatever he wants. Remember, he represents in his office, in his position, he represents the geopolitical position of Russia when he speaks. And Russia, many don't know, has fairly strong ties to Israel. So, well, first of all, why? Well, because loads of Russian Jews headed to Israel across the years since Israel's founding. They obviously retain Russian citizenship, Russian culture, they still speak the language, and they have family back home in Russia. They might send money back to Russia. So Russia is close with the Israeli state, but it's not bought and paid for like US officials, which is why at a state level, you hear Russia spitting straight facts without fax machines. They might actually still have fax machines. You know, Russia has quite a bit to go in terms of development. In many ways, they're very well developed, but they haven't plateaued their economy like the Western powers. They haven't maxed out or near maxed out. Anyway, sorry, went off on a tangent by saying spitting facts, then started talking about fax machines. Let's roll back. Russia can speak their mind, and the Russian narrative on the Israeli-Palestine issue, as it were, is a lot more grounded in reality because their officials are not bought and paid for. US officials can't do that. They can't speak the facts because their APAC handlers may get twitchy. And then the congressmen, senators would find their wallets suddenly lighter for the next election cycle. And they want those sweet, sweet dollars. Now, as the world witnesses the shaky beginnings of a Gaza ceasefire and the question of Palestinian statehood is once again the talk of the town, I wanted to share with you the Russian position. Russia makes it clearer than most countries where they lie on the spectrum of support. They say, without Palestinian statehood, the problem is not fixed, and the Middle East will continue to suffer instability and extremism until the Palestinian people have a state of their own. Здравствуйте, whatever. I don't know how to say goodbye in Russian. I'll see you on the next one. I'm Mahfouz for the unbiased news and analysis without the Western spin. You know where to find me, bruv.